Local sources say more than a dozen others have been injured in the incident. Ubeda Hito reports.
We are at the entrance to Manbij City, and what you're seeing here is the remainder of a car that exploded here earlier this morning. It was filled with agricultural workers who were here on the side of the road when this car bomb sent by the YPG terror group came and parked next to them and actually exploded. The number of victims is continuing to increase. Officials here say that at least half a dozen people have already passed away. That number may increase. This is a tactic we've seen the YPG terror group use in the past to intimidate people in the region, especially targeting individuals working in the agricultural sector, which is the dominant sector here for people in the Manbij region. This gentleman, Hassan, he was here when this happened. He actually witnessed the terror attack. He's going to explain to us a little bit about what happened this morning.
The explosion happened at 7 in the morning. The car bomb was parked on the side of the road. When we heard the explosion, I was one of the first people to arrive. When the car exploded, there was a group of women who were working in the olive fields preparing to go out. Most likely the person that gave the command to explode the car at that moment was close by and was watching. We want the general security and military police to put more checkpoints at the entrance to the city and catch these car bombs and close the terror group's tunnels. That's where they keep all their explosives. We want the world to take action.
Turkey has been at the forefront of the fight against terror in the region, conducting multiple operations across the border here in northern Syria, and they continue to insist that the threat posed by terror groups, including Daesh as well as the YPG terror group, is a top priority for the country as well as its neighbor here in Syria. They carried out, the Turkish security forces that is, carried out a cross-border operation targeting a high-level PKK terror member in Ain al-Arab, eliminating that terrorist in a pinpoint operation overnight, and Turkey says those kinds of operations are going to continue until all threats against Turkey's national security and Syria are completely neutralized.
Now, Donald Trump says tariffs on imports from the European Union will definitely happen. Tariffs on products coming from America's three biggest trading partners, Mexico, China, and Canada, will begin on Tuesday.
We may have short-term a little pain, and people understand that, but long-term, the United States has been ripped off by virtually every country in the world. I'm speaking with Prime Minister Trudeau tomorrow morning, and I'm also speaking with Mexico tomorrow morning, and I don't expect anything very dramatic. We put tariffs on, they owe us a lot of money, and I'm sure they're going to pay.
Now, the returning U.S. president has made an immediate impact on the world stage, with many leaders scrambling to understand how to respond to Donald Trump. European Union leaders are gathering in Brussels to discuss a common defense strategy. Russia's war in Ukraine has made the issue even more important, but so too has Donald Trump's insistence that NATO countries pay more into the military alliance. Alex Cadier has more.
Well, he certainly looms large over this leaders' meeting, but isn't officially on the agenda. It is a meeting of European leaders about boosting European defence. It's the first time that EU leaders have met to only discuss defence, so certainly a first, and the first summit of EU leaders since the inauguration of President Trump. He does loom large, certainly in the minds of the Danish Prime Minister, with his threats about annexing Greenland, although EU officials behind the scene telling me that they're not going to jump at every provocation, every tweet, every comment, and they are going to try and cool the temperature when it comes to the transatlantic relationship. But even in those conversations about European defence, Donald Trump looms large. France is pushing for a buy European policy, which is even if EU countries agree that 100 billion euros in extra funding for defence spending, they will have to spend it mostly on European weapons, and that is something that other countries are nervous about. Don't poke the bear, don't provoke Donald Trump by saying we will only buy European weapons. So even in European defense conversations between EU leaders, Donald Trump looming large. However, as I said, they will try and downplay that rivalry, but they are also very aware of the stakes. Of course, they've seen tariffs slapped on Canada, on Mexico, and the EU Commission has already warned that a robust response would be ready if the US does the same here.
America's top diplomat Marco Rubio has delivered a warning from Donald Trump to Panama's president over the Panama Canal. Rubio says Washington will act unless Panama stops what Donald Trump says is Chinese control of the waterway. TRT World's North America correspondent John Brain reports.
All smiles outside the presidential palace, but Marco Rubio had come to Panama to deliver a rebuke and a warning. He told the country's leaders that unless Chinese influence over their canal is curbed immediately, the US will take action. According to Donald Trump, that action could involve the US military taking control of the canal by force, a threat rejected by Panama's president.
The sovereignty of Panama is not in doubt. That is very important. There is no doubt that the canal is operated by our country, and it will continue to be so.
Chinese culture is deeply embedded in Panama. On Sunday, the Chinese New Year was being celebrated here. But it's the ownership of two vital ports by the Chinese-linked company Hutchison which concerns the Americans. However, Panama denies that gives China any undue influence.
Do you see the ship? Is it a Chinese ship that's going through the canal because...
Miguel Guerra was the first worker to be hired at the Panamanian Canal after the American handover of 1999. He's still here now.
Is it a Chinese-operated canal?
That's not true. There is no Chinese here. The Chinese that are working here in the canal is Panamanian Chinese. It's not Chinese from Asia.
So you're not seeing any Chinese influence?
There is no Chinese here working for Panama Canal.
Many Panamanians are bewildered and angered by Trump's threat.
He doesn't know how to communicate as a president. He should be wiser, because that is not the way.
It's worrisome for Panama as a sovereign country to receive this threat. We as Panamanians are a bit scared.
So could Donald Trump really send the troops here? Well, it's not quite as far-fetched as it might sound. Although the US has no right whatsoever to retake the Panama Canal, the treaty did stipulate that it has to remain neutral. So if Washington determines that a foreign power is now in control, it could, in theory, order a military intervention.
Some believe that the root of Trump's concern is not so much the operation of the canal itself, but the growing influence of China in the region as a whole.
The US has lost its connections and power in Latin America. China is now the global powerhouse in the region. So with his America First agenda, Trump wants to get America's power back. But it won't happen with any military solution.
But even the threat of military action may already be working. Panama has announced it's cancelling its participation in China's Belt and Road project. John Brain, TRT World, Panama City.
Unparalleled power and a very radical disruptive agenda. What one political analyst believes Donald Trump has achieved in his first few days in office. David Dunn, a professor of international politics at the University of Birmingham in the UK, says Trump is dismissing bureaucratic process.
What we see is Donald Trump coming back to the White House in a uniquely powerful position. It's partly having had that 4 years to prepare for his second term, unlike entering a second term exhausted. He's come in with a whole series of policies already worked out, picking teams that his main qualification is their loyalty to him. He has control of both houses and the Supreme Court. The media seem to be supine in their approach to him. So he has an unparalleled power and a very clear, radical, disruptive agenda. So his ability to follow this through is unimpeded. He is dismissing bureaucratic ways of doing things, issuing tweets and posts from his Truth Social, and he is going at things at a tremendous pace. He's a very old man in a very big hurry, it seems, in the way in which he is approaching things, wanting to get everything done in the 100 days. Before really the midterm elections, make him lightly weaker if the House would change at that time. So he is going at it with a vengeance, and we're seeing this on every realm. The major cuts to foreign aid, the shutting down of the federal government briefly, the sacking people, vengeance, retribution against his political enemies in the United States, threats against the media at home, and of course starting effectively a trade war on a massive scale across the entire world, it seems. So it's an extraordinary change in position for an American president to be taking, but there were signs there that this is what Donald Trump would do, and he is now doing it.
The biggest city in the east of the Democratic Republic of the Congo remains under control of the M23 rebels, but Goma's medical facilities are struggling. The Red Cross is still recovering bodies from the streets, and hospitals are beyond full capacity, receiving dozens of patients every day. On one day alone last week, medics at the kHz hospital removed 48 bullets from people caught up in fighting between the rebels and the army. UN experts say M23's advance into Congolese territory is being supported by about 4,000 troops from Rwanda, something Kigali denies. As fears of a regional conflict grows and the rebels insisting they will topple President Felix Tshisekedi, Grace Kuriakanja reports on repeated failures to secure peace.
Dialogue with a terrorist group like the M23 is a red line that we will not cross.
The FDLR question has to be answered.
None of the two leaders at the center of one of Africa's longest conflicts is willing to be the first to blink. To understand the context, it's necessary to return to the 90s. After the 1994 genocide against the Tutsis in Rwanda, most people fled to neighboring DRC, including Hutu fighters who perpetrated the genocide. In the DRC, they regrouped as the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda, that's FDLR. It's this group that's been fighting with the M23 rebels for decades. M23 claims it's protecting the rights of the minority Congolese Tutsis in the DRC. Now, approximately 6 million people have been killed since 1998, while the UN says 7 million have been displaced internally. Efforts have been made by the regional and international community to end this crisis. In fact, in 2002, a peace deal was signed between then Congolese President Joseph Kabila and his counterpart Kagame. Kigali agreed to withdraw its troops from eastern Congo, while Kinshasa agreed to disarm the Hutu fighters in the region. But this conflict was carried on to successive governments. So in came the Nairobi process, launched in April 2022.
Let's have mercy on these people. Let's stop the war and start the dialogue. We cannot start with dialogue and then stop the war. No, we have to stop the war first and then begin the dialogue.
Then the Luanda process relaunched in early 2024.
The only way out is without a doubt to try to resolve this conflict around a negotiating table. That is what we are doing.
A permanent ceasefire was agreed between the two countries on July 30th, but was broken almost immediately after. A December 15th meeting did not happen after the parties failed to agree on the key issue, M23. Kagame was a no-show.
It wasn't the appearance there that was the most important thing. It was what was taking us there and how it is being addressed.
Wednesday's East African Community meeting to address the crisis in Goma urged the DRC to directly engage all stakeholders, including M23. But the DRC says that amounts to legitimizing actions that violate its laws. And while a solution remains elusive, an additional 500,000 people have been displaced since January. Grace Kuriakanja, TRT World.
As internet penetration in Indonesia hits an all-time high, children are increasingly exposed to unfiltered social media content. Now, in a bid to protect its children, the Indonesian government plans to restrict social media use.
Siti Astuti is a mother of 5 children working as a helper in South Jakarta, Indonesia. Being away from home for long hours every day, her children resort to gadgets as a source of entertainment.
As soon as they come home from school at 1 p.m., they're playing on their phones until Maghrib prayer and continue. If you don't take their phones away or put a password on it, they will never stop.
As with many places in the world, kids' obsession with social media is now the norm in Indonesia, where internet penetration has reached 80%, according to the Indonesian Internet Service Provider Association. Statistics Indonesia reports that 12% of users are children between the ages of 5 and 12. Psychologists see social media's adverse effects on children firsthand. The cases include addiction and inferiority complexes. Many kids end up fighting their parents.
I've handled many cases of children with social media overexposure. They become emotionally unstable as they seem to be unable to overcome the emotions that they feel, and this affects their behavior.
The United Nations Children's Fund study highlights the risk of overexposure to social media, namely cyberbullying, data collection for targeted content, and most alarmingly, exposure to pornography and sexual crimes. It's for these reasons and more that Indonesia's newly appointed president, Prabowo Subianto, has instructed the Communications Ministry to protect children by shutting the lid on social media usage.
As a way to bridge a bill on social media restriction for minors, we plan to pass a government regulation. We are still in talks with the parliament about this bill that is aimed to protect our children.
This move isn't without precedent. Last year, Australia passed a law banning children under 16 from accessing social media. The challenge is walking the fine line between accelerating knowledge and minimizing the harmful effects of social media. A new social media restriction law might be a step in the right direction. However, enforcing it might be a whole other problem. For now, it's still the overworked and exhausted parents who are in charge for guiding their children. Wibisono Notodirjo, TRT World, Indonesia.
That's all for now. Don't forget you can visit our website for details on all of our main stories. You will find them at trtworld.com, or you can follow us on X at TRT World. Across the Balkans is up next.